It's a very creepy video. Like when I show y'all gonna be like, what the fuck is this? So it's called Padre Oye Gritos en Misa.
El Señor esté con ustedes y con tu espíritu.
Fuck that, bro. The priest didn't even react because he's probably like, nah, this is some demon shit trying to test me to stop mass or whatever.
I wouldn't go the paranormal route. Maybe it was the actual like woman, like
That sounded like a woman to you?
Yeah.
Like literally right after that, they ended up like cutting the mass short because they were like, yeah, let's stop this. Maybe they got scared. They probably thought it was like you said, somebody being crazy or something.
Yeah.
Maybe others thought it was some paranormal.
Imagine being in church and then you hear that.
I know we talked about it in the IE and Friends podcast. Churches are actually scary, which they shouldn't be scary, but at night they give like this little eerie feeling.
I think what it is because of scary movies that we've seen and how basically they play on the stuff that we feel most.
In 1991, 20-year-old Kelty Byrne worked at a place called Sealand of the Pacific. Here, animals were bred in captivity or captured from the wild. And one day, there was a show involving 3 orca whales and Kelty was a part of the show. Kelty was on the edge of the pool and accidentally tripped in. She tried to swim out, but one of the orcas grabbed her and began to drag her around the pool. Then the 3 orca whales started tossing Kelty around like a toy. They would drag her deep under to the point where she was kinda drowning and then just bring her back up. Kelty was screaming, "I don't want to die," but there was nothing anyone could do. They were outmatched by 3 whales. This went on for some time, and Kelty was essentially being tortured by 3 orca whales. They kept dragging her underneath the water, throwing her in the air, and pulling on her like dogs playing tug-of-war. Eventually, the whales brought her deep under the water, and she drowned to death. They weren't able to get Kelty's body for 2 to 3 hours, and when they did, it was completely covered in bruises and bite marks.
This is Malheur Cave, and it's known to many people as one of the creepiest places in Oregon. Malheur Cave is a 3,000-foot lava tube cave that's located on private property near Burns, Oregon. It's owned by the Masonic Lodge of Burns. And dating back to 1938, the Freemasons have been holding annual gatherings deep inside the cave. Nearly 100 Freemasons would attend each meeting. Once news of this spread to the public, tons of conspiracy theories started to form about what the cave is really used for and why the Freemasons chose this particular location for the gatherings. Some people believe that Malheur Cave is a passageway to the underworld, while others believe it's used to host satanic rituals. And then there are others who believe that it's connected to an underground tunnel network that runs through the entire US, which connects to other caves owned by the Freemasons. Of course, these are obviously just conspiracy theories with no factual evidence behind them. Other times of the year, the cave was open to the public, and while it's stunning during the day, many people reported feeling uneasy in the cave's presence at nightfall. But in 2019, the cave was officially closed off to the public, and local Freemasons built a giant gate up to the cave. They reported that they made this decision because they just wanted to protect the site from vandalism. They also said that they closed it off to the public for liability reasons. I can definitely understand why this seems creepy to some people, but what do you guys think?
This man killed pedophiles because he believed they, quote, deserved to die. This is the crazy story of Patrick Drum from Washington. So Patrick Drum was a seemingly normal guy living in Washington state. But something happened when a new roommate of his moved in with him. This new roommate was 28-year-old Gary Lee Blanton. And in 2001, Gary Lee had been convicted of raping a 17-year-old girl. And I guess when Patrick Drum found out that he was living with a pedophile, this just set him off. So on the evening of June 2nd, 2012, Patrick Drum got out a gun and murdered his roommate, Gary Lee. Then afterwards, he searched local sex offender registries and found his next victim. And his next victim would be 55-year-old Jerry Wayne Ray. In 2002, Jerry Wayne had been convicted of the first-degree rape of a child. And he had been marked on the database as someone who has a possibility of reoffending. Patrick then drove over to Jerry's house, busted in the door, and shot him point blank, murdering him in his own home. Now, after these killings, Patrick would go on the run for a few hours, and he would later tell investigators that he had a third man he was intending on targeting later that day. But eventually, authorities were alerted after Patrick Lee's wife and children went to see him at his house, and they found his dead body. After a short manhunt, Patrick Drum was arrested. The police took him into custody, but in court, he was completely unrepentant for his actions. He had no remorse. And like I said before, he told the court that the victims deserved to die. He apologized to the families of the victims, saying that it was never his intent to hurt the families, that's just collateral damage. And he then said, as for the men, actions speak louder than words. So yeah, this is just an absolutely crazy story.
See how I was talking about AI and shit?
Oh yeah.
So there was this robot, right? And they created him to do basically like an Amazon job, bro. Like a
Wait, I think I saw that. Like he was a 9-to-5 worker's shoes, and then he ends up.
he deleted himself. Yes. Well, does that not look like Amazon, bro?
Yeah, it does look like Amazon. It's conveyor belts and shit. Even the fucking robots know that we're being fucking slaves to these motherfuckers.
He probably knew that like there's no end to this. There's no point of doing it. So why is he doing it?
Yo,
you know what I'm saying? Like
these robots,
like
bro.
He probably thought it was infinite. Like he probably was calculating like when does this end?
Sometimes jobs do be depressing. Like depends what you're doing and shit.
Didn't you have an AI topic you wanted to get into? I don't know.
I have two actually. Apparently there's like a new AI scam that people could use now. It's like Scam Likely. People could call somebody's phone pretending to be you with your voice and say like, yo, like I need help, I need this amount of money, but it's not you, it's an AI modulator just
using your voice.
Yeah.
And I was also, it's been all over my For You page.
What?
It's the AI covers.
Oh,
shit.
the music covers. Yeah, bro. I'm telling you this.
City of the famous and those who would be famous, the Cecil Hotel is best known for its infamy.
This is 21-year-old Elisa Lamb riding an elevator at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. Fire crews pulled Lamb's body from the hotel's water tank on the roof.
The water did have funny taste.
It wasn't right.
I've been there multiple times, and it has to be one of the scariest places I have visited in my life.
And I look up out the window and I see a lady hanging outside her window on the 6th or the 7th floor, hanging from her window.
The hotel remains a symbol of the area's dark past.
You go past certain doors and there's pentagrams drawn on the walls. And
since I've been here, no less than 15 have died either from overdoses or suicides. And one of them said that it was because the voices told them to do it.
You're telling us stories about bodies that are left in their rooms to rot for a week, watching someone hang themselves from the side of the building. It's f***ing crazy. That building has some of the most insanely negative, depressing energy of any place that I've ever been to.
This has to be one of the most tragic incidents involving a child you will ever hear. On May 22nd, 2015, 25-year-old mother Romisha Sims took her 3-year-old son Jaher Dano Lee to the park for some quality time. Once they got there, Romisha placed her son on one of the swings and began pushing him. All was good until Romisha started hearing voices around her and found herself in some sort of trance and was unable to lift Jaher out of the swing. And when she snapped out of it, she found herself pushing her dead 3-year-old son Jaher on the swing with police officers surrounding her. It turns out Romisha was a schizophrenic and she forgot to take her medication. And she pushed her son Jaher nearly 44 hours on the swing without stopping. Temperatures fell as low as 51 degrees and it was raining when she was pushing him, which caused Jaher to die from dehydration and hypothermia. During her trial, the judge found Romisha not criminally responsible and sent her free under a 5-year conditional release order, saying that she must see a psychiatrist and take her medication. This case is so sad, and can you imagine being this mother snapping out of that trance? She was probably so scared and confused and was wondering what happened to her little boy. Rest in peace to Jaher, and this is just so unfortunate.
Chilling murder remained unsolved for decades, but a Facebook message of a stranger may change everything. It was the 24th of March 2004. Jim Cluer had driven 45 minutes to Boyston in Chicago to visit his son Kevin. Kevin was 31 and lived in an apartment and had failed to show up for work. His car was in the car park of the apartment complex, so that was good news. However, when his dad knocked on the door, there was no reply. Now, Jim knew this was very strange considering the car was there, so he decided to force entry into the apartment. What he discovered would haunt him forever. Kevin was lying in the fetal position, deceased. He'd been stabbed in the back a total of 42 times. He was actually nude, covered in just a robe. Police were obviously called and an investigation began. The murder seemed extremely violent and personal, so police concluded this must be somebody that he knew. However, Kevin didn't seem to have any enemies at all. The night prior to his death, Kevin had actually been going out with a friend from Minnesota. Kevin went to a nightclub in the local area and apparently met somebody named Fernando. Kevin's friend reported seeing Kevin leave the nightclub with Fernando. The man is described as white and Hispanic and around 5'7". The case went frustratingly cold until around 2020. It was at this point that Kevin's brother Ron got a Facebook message from a woman. She claimed to know who killed Kevin. Now, investigators were obviously involved and they felt that the message was legit. The woman seemed to include details that had actually never been made public. Ron believes that Kevin was targeted by this Fernando and another man. He feels that Kevin may have been attacked during a robbery attempt. Now, the most up-to-date information that I could find is that the pandemic caused some delays with the investigation and Kevin's case is still unsolved. Tragically, both of Kevin's parents have passed away.
So we all mostly know about the Sauter children and how they disappeared after their home caught fire and burned down. But the very same thing happened to these two siblings, and not many people know about it. 9-year-old Chloe Leverett and 7-year-old Gage Daniel were half-siblings who were living with their grandparents back in 2012. Their grandparents were Leon and Molly McLaren, and they all lived in a cute farmhouse in Unionville, Tennessee. It was September 23rd, 2012, and the night started out just like any other. Chloe and Gage were last seen playing together in the yard at around 6:30 p.m. But at around 9:30 p.m., the house caught fire. The fire spread very quickly, and soon the house had collapsed. It was very evident that no one made it out, so once it was safe to enter, fire officials began looking for all 4 of their remains. During the search, the remains of Grandma and Grandpa, Leon and Molly, were found, along with their pet dog and bird, but absolutely no trace of Chloe or Gage was found. According to authorities, the cause of the fire was never determined, but they did find that the McLarens had over 30 propane tanks in the basement. They found evidence that the tanks had ruptured, but there was no sign of an explosion. At the beginning of the investigation, authorities believed that the kids possibly perished in the fire, but forensic anthropologists found no evidence to support this. On top of this, other experts weighed in and said that the likelihood of a body completely burning up without leaving a single trace for investigators to find is extremely low. And the fact that there are 2 bodies just completely missing doesn't add up. Authorities did put out an Amber Alert for the kids shortly after this, but nothing came of it. Chloe and Gage's mom, Cheryl, believes that her kids were kidnapped and that the fire was set intentionally. She feels this way because authorities stated that the reason the fire spread so quickly was because the basement door had been left open, amongst other factors. But according to Cheryl, it was routine for Leon to always shut and lock the basement door every night before bed because all of his tools were in there and he didn't want the kids to get into them. So the fact that it was left open leads her to believe that someone else was in the house that night. Cheryl also believes that her kids are still out there alive somewhere. And that's because 1 year after the fire, a witness reported seeing Chloe at a restaurant and took a photo of her before calling the police. But unfortunately, once the police arrived, the little girl was gone and she was never found. Cheryl believes 100% without a doubt that that little girl in that photo was Chloe. It's now been 10 years and the kids have never been found. Today, Chloe would be 19 and Gage would be 17. This is what they would look like now. If you have any information regarding the whereabouts of Chloe and Gage, please call the TBI at 1-800-824-3463.
These are pictures with horrifying backstories, part 2. Mark Barden captured this image of his son Daniel on the morning of December 14th, 2012 while preparing him for school. Tragically, later that morning, Daniel, along with 19 classmates and 6 staff members from Sandy Hook Elementary School, fell victim to a wicked act of violence. Earlier that morning, 20-year-old Adam Lanza shot and killed his mother and then made his way to the elementary school to carry out the deranged act. Lanza shot himself before police arrived. On June 8, 2001, Mamoru Takuma entered an elementary school and killed 8 children with a knife, and 15 others were seriously injured. When asked for his motive, he said, "I've become disgusted with everything. I've tried to kill myself several times, but I couldn't. I wanted to be caught and be given a death sentence." Takuma was then convicted in August 2003 and executed on September 14, 2004. On June 11, 2021, commercial lobster diver Michael Peckard was swallowed by a humpback whale near Provincetown, Massachusetts. For over 30 seconds, his crewmates feared for his life, but fortunately, the whale resurfaced after about 40 seconds, spitting Michael out, and crazy enough, he survived with only bruising and a dislocated knee. This is just crazy, and imagine getting swallowed by a humpback whale. Next, this is the head of Portugal's first ever serial killer, Diego Alves. He murdered 70 people in the 19th century. His head was cut off, then preserved in a jar in 1841, and 182 years later, his head remains in that same jar on display at the University of Lisbon.
Mujer Casos de la Vida Real episode. It's another dark episode, one of the darkest episodes.
Right now, for anybody who's sensitive to anything with kids, anything like that, just we're letting you know right now, this is not no joke, this is some real shit.
So this episode is called Niña Madre. The episode starts off with like a regular family, you know, 2 parents, a little girl, her name is Laura, right? They're just sitting at the table and the grandpa is there. Then it starts getting weird because the daughter, Laura, is kind of forced to sit on the grandpa's lap. And she feels kind of uncomfortable, but like the parents aren't really realizing and stuff. She says, can I go to my room? He goes in there and then he starts touching her. He obviously starts doing weird to her. I'm not gonna get too much into detail. And then the grandpa comes out of the room. The mom goes in, checks in on her, and she's like, grandpa's weird and stuff. But the mom doesn't believe her though.
Of course.
The mom yells at her, gets tight at her, you know what I'm saying? Apologize to your grandpa. The mom ends up telling the dad what's going on. And then the dad is like, nah, that's disrespectful. Like, we have to... She like knows how to respect her elders.
So both parents don't believe her?
More time goes on and she's still getting abused by her grandpa, right? Until one day, the little girl throws up. They rush her to the doctors. They find out that nothing is wrong with her. So the grandpa was already worried as soon as like they said that they're going to take her to the doctor. They come back home and they're like, they're going to do some tests on her. They determined that the
little girl's pregnant.
She couldn't believe it. She was like, what the f is going on? The little girl's like, yeah, my grandpa's been doing this to me. It's been going on for a long time. I've been trying to tell my parents, but they don't believe me. They come back home. They end up telling the dad. The dad ends up getting tight as fuck, takes a machete, goes to where the grandpa is, and he kills him.
I never knew that was a Mujer Casos de la Vida Real episode, bro. Because I remember seeing that specific episode.
And this is a real life case. Obviously, they don't say
who it was,
but keep in mind, shit happens everywhere.
Yeah. I know we posted a Mujer Casos case before,
and nobody ever talked about that show.
What we're gonna do for you guys every month, we're gonna have one dark episode.
Katie Beers was just 9 years old when she was kidnapped by a family friend and held in an underground bunker for 17 days. Katie lived with her mom and older half-brother on Long Island, New York, and her life really didn't start out great. She was often SA'd and abused by her godmother's husband, Sal. So when John, a family friend and neighbor, started giving her a lot of attention and gifts, she was really hoping that life would get better. But on December 28, 1992, just 2 days before her 10th birthday, John lured her to his house with the promise of giving her birthday presents. Once there, he forced her into a 6x7-foot underground bunker that was located underneath his garden in his backyard. The bunker was accessible by a 6-foot-long tunnel with a large concrete door, and that was hidden behind a bookcase in John's office. For 17 days, John kept Katie chained to a bed in a very small room that consisted of a TV and a toilet. He would bring her food and toys and would often sexually assault her. John told Katie that he had planned to keep her there forever and was going to take a photo of her while asleep and send it to police so that they would think she was dead. But instead, John forced Katie to record a message saying that she was taken by a man at knife point. And for some reason, John then played that message at a payphone outside of an arcade that was not far from them. He would go on to tell the staff at the arcade that he had lost Katie, and eventually the police were called. But John quickly became the main suspect. And that's because it came to light that before he abducted Katie, he was actually sexually assaulting her older half-brother. That, along with the fact that many arcade staff members saw him enter the arcade alone on the day Katie disappeared. 17 days after kidnapping Katie, John ended up confessing to authorities. He took them to the bunker where they were able to thankfully rescue Katie alive. John told police that he had built this bunker specifically for Katie and had planned it years in advance. John was then arrested and found guilty of kidnapping. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison, but he was never charged for sexually assaulting Katie. He died in prison from natural causes in 2013. Sal was also sent to prison for his sexual assault against Katie. Shortly after being rescued, Katie was sent to live with foster parents because of the abuse and neglect she experienced, and they raised her into adulthood. Katie went on to say that she is living a very happy life, and on the 20th anniversary of her rescue, she released a memoir titled Buried Memories.
A businessman disappeared into thin air until a trucker came forward with a fascinating claim. John Cheek was a successful 28-year-old from Memphis, Tennessee. He'd finished business school and got a job as a chief financial officer at a real estate company. His family were obviously extremely proud of him and he had his whole career ahead of him. That's what made his sudden disappearance so unsettling. John was working incredibly hard and it was paying off. He was travelling all across the world and had a £1 million deal he was just about to close. By now it was December 1993. It was incredibly out of character when on the 2nd of the month he vanished. He failed to turn up for work and his colleagues were incredibly concerned. As the day went on, some people at his work just presumed that he must have been so burnt out from all the work he was doing and potentially just needed a rest. The following day, a worrying discovery was made. John's car was found abandoned 12 miles away from where he lived. The car was positioned where the highway crosses over the Mississippi River. When police examined the car, there was no sign of foul play. Theories spread that maybe John had ended his life off the bridge. However, they did a full search of the river and nothing was found. Then there was a very strange development. 2 months after he vanished in February, a man named Ron Jackson happened to be travelling through the area. He worked as a trucker and was used to just being in lots of different locations. He was stopped in his tracks when he saw a missing persons poster with a man on it that he recognised. The face was John Cheek. Ron had met him the day before. Ron said the pair had bumped into each other at a truck stop in Virginia. Now, Ron stated that the reason why he did remember John's face was that he didn't seem to be like the usual people that he would meet there. He noticed he had a crisp, bright white shirt on and seemed to be very well educated. Now, Ron described his demeanour as rambling. He said he was definitely not 100% in all his mental capabilities. Ron also described him as wearing slip-on moccasins. John's family confirmed this is exactly the type of shoe that he wore. Theories then spread that maybe John had experienced mental health difficulties arising from stress. It's theorized that maybe he developed some kind of amnesia. To this day, there have been no other sightings of John.
Welcome campers and camp whores to the Daily Camper week of July 25th, 2010. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get started.
This anonymous web show is one of the most disturbing things that's ever existed on the internet. What I just showed you was a clip from an online program called The Daily Capper. The Daily Capper was a program put on by pedophiles all across the world. And this was the head of a community of people known as cappers. This online community of pedophiles known as cappers would go onto the profiles of underage girls and boys, flatter them with compliments, shower them with praise, and try to get them to flash them so that they could take a screen cap of their nude body. And after that, these pedophiles would then blackmail these children with these images. They would send these photos to friends, family members, schools. And there were all sorts of code words and online forums where these cappers, aka disgusting pedophiles, would meet and exchange information. The Daily Capper itself, this program, was a program put on by these pedophiles to talk about news and events that were happening within this pedophile community. It's really disturbing to me that they chose this because I used to watch the show Crashbox as a child, and I think that it's eerie and haunting that they're actually using imagery from a children's show for this pedophile network. Now, sadly, one of the victims of this capping community was a girl named Amanda Todd. Amanda's story is particularly well known because of the YouTube video she created before she took her own life. But at one point during Amanda's stages of cyberbullying, she was featured repeatedly on the Daily Capper, this program. And the intro always started like this: "Welcome cappers and cam whores." And then at the end, the newscaster up here would say, "Happy hunting," encouraging these pedophiles to go target more children. And they would do awards at the end of the year for the best, most prolific pedophiles in their community. These awards that they gave out included Blackmailer of the Year, Capper of the Year, Cam Whore of the Year, Cam Site of the Year, and Shocker of the Year, where they were basically giving awards to pedophiles and their victims. There's a lot of information online about this whole show and these pedophiles, but something really disturbing to me is the fact that most of the people involved in the Daily Capper were never brought to justice and they were never caught. That means that all of these pedophiles that were celebrating with each other and glorifying their disgusting acts are still out there, probably on the internet today. And to end this, I'm going to show you one more clip from the show, which I find is particularly disturbing.
Candy Beaches returned this week for the first time in a month. The reason they were gone so long is because they said someone called the police on them. Twice. I think I know what this is all about.
Be reported to the cyber police and the state police.
Looks like he wasn't joking around. Maybe it was their Good Morning America interview that prompted cyber police.
This devastating UK football stadium tragedy killed 56 people. Valley Parade is the Bradford City Stadium located in West Yorkshire. On the 11th of May 1985, it was hosting a football match between Bradford City and Lincoln. It was the final game of the season and fans were in high spirits. There was a crowd of around 11,000 in attendance. Now the score was 0-0 at around 3:40. At this time, the commentator noticed a small fire. It appeared to be around 3 rows from the back in one of the stands. It turned out that the man had a lit cigarette and he tried to put it on the floor to put it out with his foot. The cigarette was on the floorboard and actually fell through the floorboards onto the ground. The man tried to pour the rest of his coffee on top of it to put it out. However, a couple of minutes later, he noticed smoke, so he called a steward over. It took less than 4 minutes for the fire to spread to an unimaginable degree. Unfortunately, the stand actually had a wooden roof that was due to be replaced with a steel roof at the end of the season. The fire had engulfed the entire stand and panicked fans were trapped in the blaze. Crowds of people were desperately trying to flee the stand and get onto the pitch. Exit doors were locked and people were banging, desperately trying to break them down. Tragically, many fans were burnt to death. 56 people were killed in the disaster. 265 were injured. That's not to mention the absolute hundreds of people who witnessed people die and were literally traumatized for life. The youngest victim was just 11 years old. The oldest was the 86-year-old former chairman. Now, there were so many fans in the disaster who were praised for being heroes. More than 50 people were awarded for bravery. One was 10-year-old schoolgirl Joanne Barron. It was her first ever football match. Now, she actually really terrifyingly got separated from her family during the panic. She ended up helping an elderly man escape before trying to escape herself. She suffered severe burns all over her body and had to undergo multiple surgeries. When interviewed, she stated, "I wasn't frightened at the time and I just carried on doing what I could do." She was given an award for her bravery presented by Princess Diana. An inquest into the disaster concluded a death by misadventure outcome. The tragedy obviously caused changes in UK stadium regulations. Wooden stands were banned and Bradford City is now affiliated with the Bradford Burns Unit as its official charity.
Whomever coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
A Subway worker was killed over an argument about too much mayonnaise. 26-year-old Brittany Macon was working at a Subway in Atlanta in June 2022. It was a normal day at work for her until a terrifying incident occurred. She was working with her colleague Jada Statham, who was 24 at the time, when a man named Melvin Williams entered the store. It's believed that after ordering food, an argument erupted between him and the employees over him having too much mayo on his sandwich. The store owner described how all hell broke loose. Brittany was shot and tragically died as a result. Jada's 5-year-old son was actually in the restaurant at the time and witnessed the whole hideous ordeal. Jada was shot, but thankfully she survived. Melvin is charged with murder and aggravated assault among other related charges. Thankfully, he is currently behind bars while he awaits his trial, which has not been yet scheduled.
My parents locked me in a freezer for 2 weeks. My name is Marina Sabatier, and I am 8 years old. I was born in 2001 of an unwanted pregnancy, and my mother initially abandoned me but changed her mind after a month and regained custody of me. From the age of 2, my mother began to abuse me. She deprived me of food, hit me, and made me take cold showers. She would take me to the basement to beat me so that the neighbors wouldn't suspect. She would also force me to eat my own vomit. As time went by, the torture became more and more violent. My parents would tie me to the bed with tape and force me, for example, to swallow spoonfuls of salt and vinegar. I stopped going to school because I was too mentally and physically exhausted from my mother's beatings, and the others might have suspected something. One day I succumbed to the beatings and died in the basement where I used to be beaten. My parents put my lifeless body in the freezer for 2 weeks, then put me in a plastic box and covered it with cement. Shortly after reporting my disappearance, my parents confessed to my murder and were sentenced to just 30 years in prison.
Have you ever wondered why no anime character looks like a human? Well, that's because they're actually based off of cats. Okay, so this person asked, why in Japanese anime do none of the characters look Japanese? And it's because anime characters are cats. The goal of manga anime was neither Japanese nor Caucasian. The theory that if you pursue cute, it resembles a kitten is influential. No matter how you look at the profile knows it's not human. And just take a look, that does not look like a human nose, but it does look like a cat's nose. Just look at this picture for 1 second. Are you actually going to tell me that these characters do not look like those kittens? It's honestly identical, and it's just cats in kind of a human form. Japanese anime characters are actually based on kittens and not Westerners. So the real question is, if you're obsessed with anime and think all the characters are cute or hot, does that mean you find cats attractive? I'm just joking, but this is absolutely mind-blowing and I never heard about this until today. So please let me know your thoughts on this because I'm extremely curious. This is what will happen when Kim Jong-un passes away. Up first, the entire country of North Korea will be completely devastated, and they will all be crying in the streets. This is because they literally look at Kim Jong-un as a god. This is because he brainwashed his citizens this bad that they actually believe this stuff. So it's like losing a parent to them. Next up, North Korea will most likely collapse. If political order was not restored quickly, the country could easily and most likely go into a civil war. Also, Kim Jong-un has no family member to take his place since he killed his own brother. That was the only one that could have taken his place. Next up, there very well could be a nuclear war. We all know Kim Jong-un has spent a lot of time and energy on creating and producing nuclear weapons, and we all know he threatened the world to use them multiple times. So what if his dying wish is to launch all of his nuclear weapons onto the world and just completely take everybody out with him? This is absolutely scary, but if there's one man that would do this, it's definitely Kim Jong-un. Okay, so this invention might be able to save you from the end of the world. Okay, so we all know that a great flood or a tsunami is one of the most likely things to knock out humanity. It's been told to happen in the past, like with Noah's Ark and other stories. But what if it happened today? How would we prepare? Well, an Australian shipbuilder whose name is Matt Duncan designed a tsunami survival pod that can withstand 6 tons of debris and hold up to 4 people. And the thing is, it only cost $8,500, so let me know if you're going to get it.
Died by drinking 14 liters of water in a competition to try to win a Nintendo Wii console. My name is Jennifer Strange, and I was 28 years old when I decided to participate in a competition that was broadcast on the local radio in California. The contest, called Hold Your Pee for a Wii, was simple. The person who could drink the most liquid in 1 hour without using the bathroom would walk away with a Wii, and I really wanted it for my children. The competition started, and I drank over 14 liters of water. I quickly began to feel dizzy, nauseous, and had a severe headache. Several times I complained about the pain I was experiencing, but the organizers pretended not to understand. One of the hosts even laughed, saying I looked pregnant. A few hours later, while I was at home, I died in my bathroom. My body had taken in more water than it could handle. I died, leaving behind my 11-month-old daughter, my 2 boys, and my husband. The local station KNBR, which had organized the competition, was sentenced to pay a fine of $1.7 million to my family, and the show's host, Dave Sholin, was fired.
This woman jumped off a top-floor balcony to escape her jealous boyfriend. 28-year-old Amy Beckley had been dating 28-year-old footballer Shaquille McDonald for about 6 weeks. Shaquille played professional football for clubs such as Derby County and Coventry. She said that in the first few weeks of them dating, he love-bombed her and showered her with affection. She was a single mum and really appreciated having someone looking after her and caring for her. However, she saw a completely different side to him when they were on a night out in March 2023. They'd been out in Arcadian in Birmingham when he accused her of speaking to a bouncer. He snatched her phone and keys and called her derogatory names and made her get in a taxi with him. In the taxi, he put her in a headlock, bit her, scratched her, and slapped her. After they got home, CCTV captured him launching another vicious attack at her. He smashed her into a concrete wall, dragged her inside, and strangled her repeatedly. She lost consciousness and he left the room, and when she came to, she tried to ring 999 on silent. However, she became so terrified of him that she jumped 14 foot from her top floor balcony to escape him. She broke both arms in doing so. Now, luckily her fall was broken slightly by a balcony below hers, and someone had been outside having a cigarette at the time. They helped her inside and got her some help. Police arrived and Shaquille tried to flee but was detained. Amy was in an absolutely horrific state. You can see the images on Google if you want to go and look at those, but they are really shocking. Shaquille was jailed for just 2 years and 8 months after admitting to actual bodily harm and strangulation.
I played darts on my mother's decapitated head. My name is Ed Kemper, and here's my horrible story. One evening, my mother returned drunk from an evening. She was making a lot of noise and woke me up, so in an excess of anger, I slit her throat and tore her head. I inserted my penis into her decapitated head. Then I hung his head on the wall and threw darts to play. I finally crushed the bones of the skull with my feet and pulled out his tongue. His tongue kept shouting and complaining. I ended up calling the police and denouncing myself. Then I was imprisoned for life. I wanted to commit suicide twice in prison, but I was saved by guards.
A man did the unthinkable to a hospitalised child in Blackburn. It was the 15th of May 1948 in Lancashire. June Ann Devaney was just 3 years old when she was admitted to Queen's Park Hospital in Blackburn with pneumonia. She was under the care of nurse Gwendolyn Humphreys on the night in question. Now, little June had actually improved quite a lot and she was due to be discharged the next morning. Then, disturbingly, at around 1:20 a.m, while the nurse was preparing things in the back room, she felt a cold draft and noticed a door open. She went to see what was going on and was horrified when she saw one of the cots was empty. She then noticed something terrifying, a trail of adult footprints leading to the door. The nurse raised the alarm and contacted police. At 3:17 a.m, tragically they found the little child's body. She was face down in the grass not far from the ward. She was partially clothed with bloodstains on her body. The hospital immediately became a crime scene and a murder investigation began. The post-mortem found that the child had been AR'd and had teeth marks in her. A taxi driver reported to police that he had picked up a man with a local accent close to the hospital on the night of the crime. Now, the killer's fingerprints were actually found on a bottle next to June's cot. Over 46,000 sets of prints were tested against these until finally a match. The killer was Peter Griffiths, who eventually confessed. He pleaded guilty due to insanity and said he was drunk at the time and killed June in a fit of rage. He was found guilty of the crime and sentenced to death and was executed aged 22.
Barbie has a much creepier history than I thought. I'm going to show you some theories about Barbie that have been keeping me up at night, and I cover all sorts of creepy and true crime stuff, so follow along. In 2010, Barbie released a doll that had a camera on her necklace as well as a video screen on her back. This doll has since been discontinued, but there's a lot of rumors about what happened to this footage when it was recorded. So people have always theorized that the footage was collected and sold either by Mattel or by someone more nefarious. And it's been mentioned how easy it would have been for hackers to collect and sell all this data. The FBI even put out a statement about it. Barbie also released and discontinued the Hello doll, which could listen to children and respond with over 8,000 pre-recorded answers. A lot of parents worried that these dolls were potentially recording their children and then selling that data, but this doll also has really concerning reviews. Like, people say that the doll won't take no for an answer. Like, if she asked if you wanted to hear a story and then you said no, she would actually push back and then just tell you the story anyways. And the doll would also ask really specific and targeted questions about children, like how big their families were and if they had any siblings. Was this doll just collecting market data on children, or was it something much weirder?
This former teacher made an unaliving pact with a student that she kidnapped and assaulted. This is Kara Dickey, and she was 34 years old when she assaulted a 14-year-old student of hers. Now, at the time of her arrest, Kara Dickey was a middle school teacher. She was married, she had kids of her own, but she somehow got involved with a 14-year-old student of hers. And quickly, the relationship between her and her student grew from platonic to extremely inappropriate. She was sending him inappropriate text messages, and at one point it began to get physical. And on the afternoon of June 16, 2008, she went to the kid's house, picked him up, supplied him with rum and various over-the-counter drugs, and then took him on a road trip visiting many locations around the Buffalo, New York area, all the while they were engaging in inappropriate behavior with each other, if you know what I mean. And in an even more disturbing twist, she actually made a pact with the child that she was abusing that they would both take their own lives if they were ever caught by the police. Obviously, this never happened because she was caught by the police, brought to trial, and she was convicted of the assault of a child. And she served a few years in prison for these charges, but she was released in 2014 and just 2 years later was back in prison because one day she said she was done with parole, she cut off her ankle monitor and went on the run. Now, obviously, the police eventually caught up with her again. She was sent back to prison, and then after her release in 2018, she violated the terms of her parole again and was sent back to prison. And this time, people thought that she may have been involved with another child. I don't know, people like this are dangerous, and this story goes to show that pedophiles aren't always men.
Part 2 of the Amara Carson case, just a quick trigger warning here. Amara's injuries are horrific and it's particularly hard to listen to.
Amara had been beaten so severely that the multitude of fractures to her skull connected with each other. Her brain was torn, an arm and a leg had spiral fractures from being twisted. Her torso had been squeezed with a lot of force until her ribs and sternum broke, and there were 24 human bite marks all over her tiny body. Her head and face were completely swollen and bruised. Her liver was torn, as was her private area. Underneath her tongue was torn, and she'd also been strangled.
The severity of Amara's injuries made it impossible to tell which was the final injury, so a cause of death couldn't be determined. Eventually it was determined that Amara had been tortured for around 30 hours, with different stages of the exorcism occurring. Blaine had been the one to cause all the injuries, while Jessica sat in another room listening to her daughter's screams. Jessica said that Amara had managed to escape the room a couple of times and run towards her, before Blaine took her back into the room to be tortured further. Jessica was fully complicit in the murder and she made absolutely no attempts to protect her child. The couple were arrested for the murder of baby Amara. They were both found guilty. Jessica was sentenced to life without parole for capital murder, while Blaine received the death penalty. Blaine Milan was due to be executed by lethal injection on January 21st, 2021. However, he won a stay of execution and remains on death row.
Okay, so this is kind of a weird thing that's happening, but the head of Scientology, David Miscavige, is reportedly missing. He's currently under investigation for child trafficking, and lawyers have tried to serve him 27 times in the last 4 months, but no one knows where he is. The charges come from 3 victims who claim that Miscavige forced them to work on boats as children after they were also forced to sign a $1 billion contract. In Scientology, they consider you to be an adult at 6 years old. One of the victims also claimed that after her mother left Scientology, the victim was forced to stay in a closet for 48 hours. All of this, of course, also comes after Shelley Miscavige, David's wife, has not been seen since 2007, even though recently it's been reported that she might be living in Big Bear, California.
This girl vanished after seeing H in concert in Birmingham. What police found in a park the next day shocked the community. Keely Bunker from Tamworth in Staffordshire had only just celebrated her 20th birthday. 12 days later, she was going to see H in concert to continue the celebrations. It was the 19th of September 2019 and Keely and her friend attended the show. Afterwards, they headed to the nightclub Snobs. The girls were having a seemingly normal night out and were surrounded by friends. This included 20-year-old Wesley Street. Now, Keely and Wesley were actually childhood friends. They'd known each other since infant school, so this wasn't unusual. They headed back to Tamworth in a taxi after the night out, and Keely's friend Monique actually offered her to sleep over at her house. However, Keely replied quite chillingly, "I've got Wes, he'll walk me back, it'll be fine." That evening though, Keely would not be fine. She trusted Wesley to walk her home, but he took her on a detour. It's believed that he may have convinced her to go to the rugby club to have a smoke with him. When Keely failed to turn up for an interview the next day, her dad rang the police. Everyone knew that Wesley was the last person to have seen Keely, so the police questioned him. He claimed that they had walked home together and he'd last seen her by a phone box by his house. He gave police a detailed account of their route back and seemed like he wanted to help. Tragically, Keely's body was found at 9 p.m. that night, lying face down in a pool near the edge of Wigington Park. Wesley was arrested and tellingly, police noticed he had scratches on his face. GPS, DNA and CCTV evidence all proved that Wesley's account of what happened that night was a lie. CCTV captured the pair at Tamworth Rugby Club at 4:23 a.m. Keely's bag was found a short distance away. Wesley's jacket was found in the park with makeup all over the sleeves. His DNA was also found on Keely during a post-mortem, which proved he had SA'd her. He was found to have choked her to death before going home to bed. In court, he was also found guilty of 5 further S offences which took place in 2015, 2017 and 2019. He faces a minimum of 29 years in prison.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
This entire family have been missing since February. Monica and her 2 sons, Aidan 11 and Nicholas 9, are thought to be in grave danger. So where are the Lutz family? Stephen Lutz, 44, a drug user and suffering from multiple personality disorder, turned up at the family home on the 10th of February in his pickup truck with a U-Haul attached to the back. The whole family left the residence and haven't been seen since. The phones have been disconnected and his wife and 2 sons are thought to be in grave danger. In January, Monica and her 2 sons were seen fleeing from the house barefoot. They ran to a neighbour's to call 911. Stephen had become extremely violent and had punched Monica in the face. Stephen was arrested, given a restraining order and warned to stay away from his wife and sons. Stephen was already known to the police. He'd been known to them since 2006 for his use of methamphetamine and for his violence. What's really scary about this story, and the main reason I think that this family are in danger, is that 11-year-old Aidan told his grandmother and his sister, who's estranged from the parents, that he twice walked in on his father talking to a clown mask on his bedroom wall. What he said sent actual shivers down my spine. He said, "I know what I have to do. I have to kill 3 people. First my wife Monica, then Aidan, and then Nicholas." This is the boy's older sister who's estranged from both her parents. Aidan had texted her on the day of the disappearance, saying that the family were going on vacation, but he didn't know where. His phone was disconnected shortly after. The family home was inspected on April 3rd. There were sheets on the windows, and the once immaculate house looked as if a tornado had hit every corner. There was an open suitcase on the bed, and it looked like someone had been packing but got disturbed. According to Gia Wright of the Missing Persons Awareness Network, Stephen had stole $10,000 from a safety deposit box belonging to his mother the day before the disappearance and told her, "You're never going to see me again." The last place that the family's phones pinged their location was Richmond, Indiana, and their car registration plate has been scanned in 7 states in the US, but hasn't been registered for several weeks. It's an absolute mystery, and I pray that this family are found before something terrible happens.
This is Ghost Rider 2.0, one of the worst cartel execution videos ever explained. Just like the Ghost Rider cartel video, this video is extremely hard to watch. The video is kinda short, lasting only 1 minute and 35 seconds, and as you play the video, you see a man with his hands tied behind his back, and he is sitting on the ground wearing jeans and a blue shirt. His head is bleeding, and it's clear he got multiple injuries off camera. Multiple men can be heard in the background, and one of them seems to be interrogating the victim. As the victim is being interrogated, another man pulls the rope around his wrist, making sure it's tight. And for whatever reason, they place a hat on the victim's head. The leading theory is that it represents some gang which maybe the victim is part of. They then smack the victim around for a couple seconds, then another man enters the shot carrying a log that was recently in a fire. The log is smoking and smoldering, but it's not on fire. You see the hot charcoal glowing at the end of the log. The man then gets the log and places the hot end against the victim's chest, which makes the victim let out a terrifying scream. The victim then rolls around on the ground trying to get away from the man, but he then places a hot log against his back, and again causing the victim to scream horribly. The video then jump cuts and it shows the man pinning the victim down with the log by pushing it into the back of his neck. This immobilizes the victim as he's forced to take the unbearable heat of the log. At this point, you see the victim's jeans have been stripped and you see the skin around his thighs peeling off. This is due to the severe burning done off camera. The victim continues rolling around, but when he turns over on his back, he is then burned with the log on the side of his neck. They stop burning the victim for a couple seconds and he then sits up. Then, another man pours a clear liquid over his head, completely soaking his hair, clothes, and face. The other man then places the red-hot log between his legs, burning his exposed genitals. And this is where things take a turn for the worst. The video then jump cuts again, and it shows the awful sight of the victim's head being set on fire as well as his genitals. The fire completely engulfed the victim's head, face, and shoulders.
though he is still alive rolling around on the ground, which is why people refer to this video as Ghost Rider 2.0. As the video continues, the men insult the victim as he's on fire. The video ends as the victim is still alive rolling around on the ground, but he has stopped screaming at this point. This could be due to his damaged vocal cords from the fire. There's no reports about the victim's fate, but it's safe to assume they ended up killing him. This video and case is absolutely horrific, and it's just sad and scary that stuff like this happens daily to people. Take this warning and never go searching for this video because it's absolutely horrible.
Harvey Weinstein is one of the worst sexual predators in American history, and he was able to get away with these horrific crimes for years, so let's take a look at his story. I'm going to warn you right now, we're going to go through some graphic details, so viewer discretion is advised. Harvey Weinstein was born in 1952 in Queens, New York. In his youth, he and his brother were concert promoters and brought a lot of musical acts to New York City, including bands like The Who and the Rolling Stones. And eventually, after making some money with this concert business, he and his brother started a film production company. This company was named Miramax, named after the Weinstein's parents, Miriam and Max. Miramax would go on to become one of the most successful companies in all of Hollywood. And I mean, just look at this. This is a sample of some of their films, from Scream to Tarantino films to No Country for Old Men. In the 90s and 2000s, you pretty much couldn't watch a good movie without seeing the Miramax logo up front. And this led Harvey Weinstein to have incredible power in Hollywood. I mean, this guy's touch was like the Midas touch. Pretty much anything he touched turned to gold. He and his brother just had this way of looking at movies where they could take even a bad movie and turn it into an overnight success. And people in Hollywood around this time said that they loved Harvey Weinstein. They were thanking him in all of their speeches at awards shows. They were claiming that he was one of the best people on the planet, that they loved him so much. Even people like Michelle and Barack Obama hosted him at one of their events. I mean, Harvey Weinstein was plugged up with the elitist of the elite. I don't know if that's how you say that. In 2005, Harvey and his brother left Miramax and started their own company, the Weinstein Company. And this company would also go on to produce a number of huge Hollywood films. And everything was going swell for Harvey. That is, until the year 2017. And also, before we get to that, I have to add in here that Harvey Weinstein was a hard supporter of Roman Polanski. He said that they should just let the case go and they should never charge Roman Polanski for what he did to a minor back in the 70s. So 2017 was a year of reckoning. And in October of that year, the New York Times and the New Yorker posted stories about various women that had come forward with allegations of assault against Harvey Weinstein. These had all been A-list Hollywood actresses that had been assaulted by Weinstein in public, in his hotel room, in his offices. And when this started coming out, I can remember people started to realize that Harvey Weinstein was an absolute monster. So according to all of these women that came forward, there was almost a pattern in Harvey Weinstein's assaults. He would invite promising actresses to come to his hotel room, his office, wherever he was staying, and he would act like this was going to be a business meeting or something that they had to come to. But when they would get there, he would be in a state of undress. He might have been in a bathrobe or in his underwear. He would ask them for a massage, and when they would say no, or even if they would participate in it, things would take a dark twist and he would then assault them. There were also dozens and dozens of other A-list celebrities and women who came forward who said that even though he hadn't physically assaulted them, he had harassed them so many times that they had to tell him to stop. There are also actresses out there that claim that because they rejected Harvey Weinstein's advances, he totally ruined their careers in Hollywood. He would go forth and make sure they could never work on a production in Hollywood, and he basically put a stop on their careers, even if they were getting really big. So this is really a story of power. Harvey Weinstein had so much unchecked power in Hollywood because he was such a successful producer and head of such a big studio that he was allowed to do whatever he wanted to. And in my opinion, lots and lots of people knew that this was going on, people that worked closely with Harvey, and they just chose to say nothing for so many years, which I think is just so utterly and completely disgusting. I also do want to note here as well that Harvey Weinstein was really good friends with Jeffrey Epstein, and he and Jeffrey had invested together in the past. So all this came to a head when on May 25th, 2018, Harvey Weinstein was finally arrested. And eventually, after the trial, Harvey Weinstein was sentenced to 23 years in prison in New York, and he was set to serve his sentence out on Rikers Island, one of the most notorious prisons in all of America. Eventually, he was extradited to Los Angeles, where he took part in another trial, and just this year, he was sentenced to 16 more years in California. This means that his prison sentence is almost 40 years long, and hopefully he'll never see the light of day again. This is a story of power, of corruption, and how so much unchecked power can lead to some of the worst things imaginable. And it shows that even the elite members of our society aren't fully protected or given immunity from their crimes. And that even for Harvey Weinstein, when the bell tolls, sometimes you have to answer the call.
Killer accidentally admitted to his crimes by accident when he forgot he was wearing a microphone while taking part in a documentary. This is how a true crime documentary exposed a killer. In 1971, Robert Durst met Kathleen McCormack and they got married. At the time of her disappearance in 1982, Kathleen had nearly graduated college. She was last seen by a witness at a dinner party where she appeared to be upset. She got a call from Robert and left. Robert admitted to having argued with Kathleen that night, but he said he put her on a train to New York and then never saw her again. Her friend called police to report her missing. Interestingly, Kathleen had been treated at a medical centre for facial bruises weeks prior to this and told the friend that Robert had done it. Robert had actually been dating someone else for some time prior to this and had been living separately to Kathleen. When her family broke into her cottage to try and find out where she was, they found the place had been trashed and her possessions put in the bin. Kathleen's family always believed that Robert was involved in her disappearance. In 2000, Susan Berman, a friend of Robert's, was found murdered. Now, she'd actually provided Robert with an alibi for Kathleen's disappearance. Now, pay really close attention to this next bit. Days after she was killed, a letter addressed to the Beverly Hills Police Department contained Susan's address and the word cadaver on it. On the envelope, Beverly was misspelled. Robert admitted in 2005 that Susan had called him shortly before her death to say that the police wanted to question her about Kathleen going missing. It's believed that Robert killed Susan to keep her quiet. In 2001, Robert's neighbour's body parts were found floating in Galveston Bay. Robert's elderly neighbour, Morris Black, had been killed and Robert was arrested. He was actually released on bail and fled and was found about a month later in Pennsylvania. He was found with $37,000 cash, 2 weapons, and interestingly, Morris Black's driving licence. In court, Robert claimed he was acting in self-defence. He said he'd accidentally shot Morris and dismembered his body. Due to lack of forensics, he only got 5 years in jail. This is where things get really crazy. HBO was filming a documentary called The Jinx. During production, Susan's stepson found a letter written by Robert. This contained the same spelling error in the word Beverly as the anonymous letter to police. This implicated Robert in the murder. Now, while filming the documentary, Robert needed the toilet. He forgot that he had a microphone still attached to him. He was recorded talking to himself. He said, "There it is, you're caught. You're right, of course, but you can't imagine. Arrest him." And then he said, "What a disaster. He was right. I was wrong." And finally he said, "I'm having difficulty with the question. What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course."